All right. Hello and welcome to our module on judges. This week we are going to be covering judges and prosecutors. So I'll back that up just a little bit. While our module is on prosecutors and judges, today's talk, this video lecture is going to be primarily discussing judges and the ways, quite frankly, the ways that judges get a job. We're going to talk about the way judges find themselves in the position of judging us. So, with that being said, before we get too deep into it, let's kind of bifurcate the two types of judges that we're talking about. As with many topics in this class, we're going to split that up into the state system and the federal system. Now, there's a little bit of a difference in how each of those positions, because they're absolutely different positions, how they get their job. One thing to keep in mind is that state judges, as simple as it sounds, we need to make sure that we remember the state judges are in charge of hearing cases that cover state law. We talked about the different kinds of codes. We have penal codes and abbreviated codes that cover state crimes like uh, the traffic code for a state that says you can't speed. In general, there's not a federal law that says you can't speed, with a few exceptions, maybe on military installations and whatnot. But in general, traffic laws are state laws, all the way up until robbery, domestic violence. Most homicides are state laws. So judges at the state level are going to be hearing cases like that. Federal judges are going to be hearing, again, as simple as it seems, federal cases. So cases that involve crossing state lines to commit crimes, state federal laws that include things like tax evasion or crimes against certain members of Congress or the executive branch. Those are going to be federal crimes. Uh, so with that being said, let's talk about the state judges. State judges are kind of going to go back and forth depending on the jurisdiction. Unfortunately, it's going to be not going to be one simple answer. State judges are going to either be elected or appointed. If they're appointed, they're going to be appointed by the executive branch of that state. So the executive branch of a state is going to be a governor. The governor is going to appoint them in general, and if they are elected, they're going to be elected by the electorate, those who would vote for them. Depending on the jurisdictions, that's going to determine which of those processes takes place. Now, being appointed, that's pretty cut and dry, pretty straightforward. But being elected, I mean, imagine the process of having to run for office as a judge. That means you have to raise money. You have to declare a party oftentimes. You have to have a platform. You have to be popular enough for the populace to vote for you, which is kind of a conundrum if a judge is being put in a tough situation when it comes to making what some would consider maybe unpopular decisions from the bench. One of the extreme examples that I've talked about in class before is take, for instance, a serial killer, a Ted Bundy or some sort of Night Stalker type serial killer. Imagine if there had been an error in that case and a judge was required to strike evidence that would result in one of those serial killers who's so infamous, eventually either having the charges dropped or being set free for some reason. Imagine how unpopular that decision is going to be. It's the legal decision in our hypothetical situation. A legal decision being unpopular could result in a judge not being elected or reelected again. So it's going to make it very difficult for an unbiased person to not have the decisions that they make affect their mental state when they know they have to run for office. So that takes me to the federal system. The federal system is different. The federal system doesn't have elections for judges. The federal judges are appointed by the president, the executive branch. The president of the United States appoints the federal judges. Now, that doesn't mean the president has knowledge of every single person who comes across his desk and knows, oh, I've got this laundry list of federal judges that I want to appoint. That's not necessarily the truth. In general, judges are going to be recommended to the president because the president has a lot of other things on their plate. They don't have time to vet every single prospective federal judge. So there are going to be several different entities that will, for lack of a better word, recommend or suggest to the president that they appoint this judge or that judge for a federal judgeship. Those entities can be one of the more common ones is the congressional member from the state in which that judge resides or works. Oftentimes members of Congress will recommend somebody from their own jurisdiction as essentially, for colloquially whispering in the president's ear, saying, "Hey, how about this guy? They're from my jurisdiction." Another entity is the American Bar Association. They recommend a lot. And then there's the presidential advisors. They also do a lot of the legwork when it comes to vetting prospective judges. So you see the two different kinds of ways that judges are given a job. One thing to keep in mind, the federal judgeships, once they're appointed by the President of the United States, regardless of who recommends them, they still have to be confirmed by the Senate. So that confirmation process is kind of a glorified job interview, if you will. The Senate will ask the prospective judge many, many questions, oftentimes some tough questions, especially when it comes to partisan politics. Whoever is suggesting or appointing that judge, oftentimes the other side of the aisle will have some very tough questions for them. Um, like I said, bipartisan politics, or excuse me, partisan politics being what it is today. So, with that being said, that's a little bit of an introduction to how judges come to be judges at the state and the federal level. If you have any questions on this week's assignments, I highly recommend that you reach out and we can clear those things up. And other than that, I look forward to seeing your submissions this week. Rock chalk.